Accolon of Gaul, by Madison Julius Cawein with triumphs gay of old romance. KEATS, Prelude. Why, dreams from dreams in dreams remembered. Not save this, alas, that once it seemed I thought I wandered dim with someone, but I knew not who, most beautiful and good and true, yet sad through suffering, with curl-crowned brow, soft eyes and voice, so white she haunts me. Now, and when, and where? At night in dreamland. She led me athwart a flower-showered lea where trammeled puckered pansy and the pea spread stains of pale rod poppies rinced of rain, so gorged with sun their hurt hearts ached with pain. Heaped honeysuckles, roses lavishing beams, wherein I knew were huddled little dreams, which laughed coy, hidden merriment and their blue quick gay kisses fragrancing the air. And where a river bubbled through the sward a mist lay sleepily, and it was hard to see whence sprung it, to what seas it led, how broadly spread and what it was it fled so ceaseless in its size, and bickering on into romance or some bewildering dawn of wisest legend from the storied wells of lost Barrington, where old Merlin dwells, nodding a white pole in a grand, grey beard as if some lake lady he, listening, heard, who spake like water, danced like careful showers with blown gold curls throw, drifts of wild thorn flowers, loose, lazy arms in graceful movement tossed, float flower-like down a woodland vista, lost in some peculiar note that rings a tear slow down his withered cheek, and then steals near her sweet, lascivious brow's white wonderment, and grey rude eyes, and hair which hath the scent of the wildwood Brasilian's perfumes in Brittany, and in it one red bloom's blood drop thrust deep, and so, sweet Vivian. All the glad leaves lisp like a young, soft rain from top to top, until a running surge the dark, witch-haunted solitude will urge, that shakes and sounds and stammers as from sleep some giant were aroused, and with a leap a samite gauzy creature, glossy white, showers mocking kisses fast and, like a light beat by a gust to flutter and then done, from Braciliand and Merlin she is gone. But still he sits there drowsing with his dreams, a wondrous cohort hath he. Many as gleams that stab the moated mazes of a beach, and each grave dream hath its own magic speech to sting to tears his old eyes heavy, to hang, tangled brilliance, in his beard like dew, and still faint murmurs of courts brave and fair, and forms of Arthur and proud Guinevere, grave Tristram and rare Isoud and stout Mark, bold Launcelot, chaste Galahad the dark of his weak mind, once strong, glares up with, then, the instant's fostered blossoms, die again. A roar of tournament, a rippling stir of silken lists that ramble into her, that white witch-mothered beauty, Vivian, the vast Braciliand and dreams again. Then Dagonet, King Arthur's fool, trips there, a waggish cunning, glittering on his Hera tinsel crown, and then will slightly sway thick leaves and part, and there Morgan the Fay with haughty wicked eyes and lovely face studies him steady for a little space. Ay, thou askest with thy studious eyes again, here where the restless forest hears the mane toss in a troubled sleep and moan. Ah, sweet, with joy and passion the kind hours replete, and what wild beauty here! Where roughly run huge forest shadows from the westering sun, the woods a subdued power gentle as yon tame wild things, that in the moss and grass gaze with their human eyes. Here grow the lines of pale starred green, and where yon fountain shines earned in its tremulous ferns, rest we upon this oak trunk of God's thunder overthrown years agone, not where 'tis rotted brown but where the thick bark's firm and overgrown of clambering ivy blackly buried, where wild musk of wood decay just tincts the air, as if some strange shrub on some whispering way, in some dewed dell, while dreaming of one may, in longing languor weakly tried to wake one sometime blossom and could only make ghosts of such dead aromas as it knew, and shape a spectre, budding thin as dew, to haunt these sounding miles of solitude. Troubled thou askest, Morgan, and the mood, unfathomed in thine eyes, glows rash and deep as that in some wild woman's found on sleep by some lost knight upon a precipice, whom he hath wakened with a laughing kiss. As that of some frail, elfin lady white as if of watery moonbeams, filmy dight, who waves diaphanous beauty on some cliff that drowsing purrs with moon-drenched pines, but if the lone knight follow, foul fiends rise and drag him crashing down, while she, tall on the crag, triumphant mocks him with glad sorcery till all the wildwood echoes shout with glee. As that bewildering mystery of a tarn, some mountain water, which the mornings scorn to anadem with fire and leave grey, to which some champion cometh when the day hath tired of breading on his proud young head flame furry blooms and golden chapeltade, sits rosy, trembling with full love for night, who cometh sandaled, dark in crape, the light of her good eyes a marvel, her vast hair tortuous with stars, as in some shadowy lair the eyes of hunted wild things burn with rage, and on large bosoms doth his love assuage. He, coming thither in that haunted place, stoops low to quaff cool waters, when his face meets gurgling fairy faces in a ring that jostle upward babbling, beckoning him deep to wonders secret built of old by some dim witch. A city walled with gold, with beryl battlements and paved with pearls, slim, lambent towers, wrought of foamy swirls of alabaster, and that witch to love, more beautiful to love than queens above. He pauses troubled, but a wizard power, in all his bronzen harness that mad hour plunges him, whither? What if he should miss those cloudy beauties and that creature's kiss? Ah, Morgan, that same power Accolon saw potent in thine eyes, and it hath drawn him deep to plunge, and to what breathless fate? Bliss, which, too true, he hath well quaffed of late. But, there, may come what stealthy-footed death with bony claws to clutch away his breath, and make him loveless to those eyes. Alas, fain must I speak that vision. Thus it was, in sleep one plucked me some warm fleur-de-lis, larger than those of earth, and I might see their woolly gold, loose, webby woven throw, like fluffy flames spun, gauzy with fine dew. And, asphodels, I murmured, then, these sure the Eden amaranths, so angel pure that these alone may pluck them, I and I. But with that giving, lo, she passed away beyond me on some misty, yearning brook with some sweet song, which all the wild air took with torn farewells and pensive melody touching to tears, strange, hopeless utterly. So merciless sweet that I yearned high to tear those ingot cord and gold-crowned lilies fair. Yet over me a horror which restrained with melancholy presence of two pained and awful, mighty eyes that cowed and held me weeping while that sad dirge died or swelled far, far on endless waters borne away. A wild bird's music smitten when the ray of dawn it burned for graced its drooping head, and the pale glory strengthened round it dead. Daggered of thorns it plunged on, blind in night, the slow blood ruby on its plumage white. Then I knew these blooms which she had given were strays of parting grief and waifs of heaven for tears and memories, too delicate for eyes of earth such souls immaculate. But then, my God, thus these were left, I knew then still, but of that song bereft, that rapturous wonder grasping after grief, beyond all thought, weak thought that would be thief. And bowed and wept into his hands, and she sorrowful beheld, and resting at her knee raised slow her oblong lute and smote its chords. But ere the impulse saddened into words said, and didst love me as thy lips have spake, no visions wrought of sleep might such love shake. Fast is all love and fastness of his power, with flame reverberant moted stands his tower, not so built as to chink from fact a beam of doubt, and much less of a doubt from dream. Such, the alchemic fires of love's desires, which hug this like a snake, melt to gold wires to cord the old lyre knew whereon he lyres. So ceased, and then, sad softness in her eye sang to his dream a questioning reply. Will love grow less when dead the roguish spring, who from gay eyes sowed violets whispering, peach petals in wild cheeks, wan wasted throw, of withering grief, laid lovely, 'neath the dew? Will love grow less? Will love grow less when comes Queen Summer tall, her throat a lily long and spiritual, rich as the poppied swaths, droned haunts of bees, her cheeks, a brown maid's gleaning on the leas? Will love grow less? Will love grow less when autumn sighing there broods with long frost streaks in her dark, dark hair, tears in grave eyes as in grave heavens above, deep lost in memory's melancholy? Love, will love grow less? Will love grow less when winter at the door begs on her scant locks icicles as hoar, while death's eyes hollow o'er her shoulder dart a look to wring to tears then freeze the heart? Will love grow less? And in her hair wept softly, in her breast rose and was wet with tears, like as, distressed, night steals on day rain sobbing through her curls. Though tears become thee even as priceless pearls, weep not for love's sake. Mine no gloom of doubt, but woe for sweet love's death such dreams brought out. Nay, nay, crowned, throned and flame anointed he kings our twin kingdomed hearts eternally. Love, high in heaven beginning and to cease no majesty when hearts are laid at peace, but reign supreme, if souls have wrought as well, a god in heaven or a god in hell. Yea, Morgan, for the favor of his face all our rich world of love I will retrace, hurt in that battle where thy brother Strove with those 5 kings thou wot'st of, dearest love, wherein the 5 were worsted. I was brought to some king's castle on my shield, methought, out of the grind of spears and roar of swords, from the loud shields of battle-bloody lords, culled from the mountains slain where havoc sprawled, gorged to her eyes with carnage, growling crawled, by some tall damsels. Tire-maids of some queen stately and dark, who moved as if a sheen of starlight spread her presence, and she came with healing herbs and searched my wounds. A dame so marvellous in raiment silvery I feared lest some attendant chaste were she to that high holy grail, which Arthur hath sought ever widely by hoar wood and path, thus not for me, a worldly one, to love, who loved her even to wonder, skied above his worship as our moon above the main, that passion's upward yearning in great pain, and suffers wearily from year to year, she peaceful pitiless with virgin cheer. Ah, ideal love, as merciless as fate, and, oh, that savage aching which must wait for its fulfillment, tortured love and tears, until that beauty dreamed of many years bends over one from luminous skies, so grand one's weakness fears to touch its mastering hand, and hesitates and stammers nothing's weak, and loves with love that cannot speak. Ah, there's the tyranny that breeds despair, breaks hearts whose strong youth by one golden hair coiled round the throat is sooner strangled dumb than by a glancing dagger thrust from gloom of an old heiress at the very hour one thought one safest in one's guarded tower. Thus, Morgan, worshipping that lady, I was speechless, longing now to live, now die, as her fine face suggested secrets of some passion kin to mine, or scorn of love that dragged heroic humbleness to her feet, for one long look that spake and made such sweet. Ah, never dreamed I of what was to be, nay, how could I, while that agony of doubtful love denied my heart too much to dream of that perfection such as was to grant me boisterous hours of life and sever all the past as with a knife. One night a tempest scourged and beat and lashed the writhing forest, and vast thunders crashed clamorous with clubs of levin, and anon, between the thunder pauses, seas would groan like some enormous curse a knight hath lured from where it soared to maim it with his sword. I, with eyes partly lidded, seemed to see that cloudy, wide-wrenched night's eternity yawn hells of golden ghastliness, and sweep distending foams tempestuous up each steep of furious iron, where pale mermaids sit with tangled hair black blown, who, bit by bit, chant glimmering, beckoning on to strangling arms some hurt bark hurrying in the ravenous storm's resistless exultation, till there came one breaker mounting inward, all aflame with glow-worm green, to boom against the cliff its thunderous bulk, and there, sucked pale and stiff, tumbled in eddies up the howling rocks my dead, drawn face, eyes lidless, matted locks oozed close with brine, tossed upward merrily by streaming mermaids. Madly seemed to see the vampire echoes of the hoarse wood, who, collected, sought me. Down the casement drew wet, shuddering fingers sharply. Thronging fast up hooting turrets, fell thick screaming, cast down bastion battlements trooped whistling off, from the wild woodland. Growled a backward scoff, then far away, hoofs of 1,000 gales, as wave rams wave up windy bluffs of Wales, loosed from the groaning hills, the cohorts loud, spirits of thunder, charioteered of cloud, roared down the rocking night chord with the glare of fiery eyeballs swimming, their drenched hair blown black as rain unkempt back from black brows, wide mouths of storm that voiced a hell carouse and bulged tight cheeks with wind, rolled riotous by ruining to ruinous cliffs to headlong die. Once when the lightning made the casement glare squares touched to gold, between it rose her hair, as if a raven's wing had cut the storm death driven seaward, and a vague alarm stung me with terrors of surmise where hope as yet pruned weak wings crippled by their scope. And, lo, she kneeled low, radiant, wonderful, lawn-raimented and white, kneeled low, to lull these thoughts of night such storms might shape in thee, all such to peace and sleep. Ah, God! To see her like a benediction fleshed, with her hearing her voice, her cool hand wandering bare wistful on feverish brow throw, long deep curls. To see her rich throat's carcanetted pearls rise as her pulses, eyes large influence poured toward me straight as stars, whose sole defense against all storm is their bold beauty. Then to feel her breathe and hear her speak again. Love, mark, I said or dreamed I moaned in dreams, how wails the tumult and the thunder gleams. As if of Arthur's knights had charged 2 fields, bright as sun winds of dawn, swords, spears and shields flashed lordly shocked, had, to a man gone down in burst of battle hurled, lain silent sown. Love, one eternal tempest thus with thee were calm, dead calm. But, no, for thee and me such calm proves tempest. Speak. I feel thy voice throb soft, caressing silence, healing noise. Is radiance loved of radiance? Day of day? Lithe beam of beam and laughing ray of ray? Hope loved of hope and happiness of joy, or love of love, who hath the world for toy? And thou loves at my voice? Fond Accolon, why not? Yea, why not? Nay, I prithee, groan not for that thou hast had long since thine all. She smiled, and dashed down storm's black crumbled wall, baptizing moonlight bathed her foot and face deluging, as my soul brake toward her grace with worship from despair and secret grief, that felt hot tears of heartsease sweet and brief. And one immortal night to me she said words, lay I white in death had raised me red. Rest now, they were, I love thee with such love. Some speak of secret love, but God above hath knowledge and divinement. Passionate lo, to lie by thee tonight my mind is, so she laughed, sleep well. For me, why, thy fast word of knighthood, look thou, and this naked sword laid in betwixt us. Let it be a wall strong between love and lust and loves it me all in all. Undid the goodly gold from her clasped waist, unbound deep locks, and, like a blossom faced, stood sweet and unswayed. Stem that ran to bud in breasts and face a graceful womanhood. And fragrance was to her as natural as odor to the rose, and she a tall, white ardor and white fervor in the room moved, some pale presence that with light doth bloom. Then all mine eyes and lips and limbs were fire, my tongue delirious throbbed a lawless lyre, that harped loud words of laud for loveliness. Inspired of such, but these I cannot guess. Then she, as pure as snows of peaks that keep sun-cloven crowns of virgin, vanquishing steep, frowned on me, and the thoughts, that in my brain had risen a glare of gems, set dull like rain, and fair I spake her and with civil pain. Thine, sweet, a devil's kindness which is given for earthly pleasure but bars out from heaven. Temptation harbored, like a bloody rust on a bright blade, leaves ugly stains, and lust is love's undoing when love's limbs are cast a commonness to desire that makes unchaste, and this warm nearness of what should be hid makes love a lawless love. But, thou hast bid, rest thou, I love thee, how, I only know, but all that love shall shout, out, at love's foe, and, turning side into my hair, and she stretched the broad blade's division suddenly. And so we lay its fire between us twain, unsleeping I, for, oh, that devil pain of passion in me that strove up and stood a rebel wrangling with the brain and blood. An hour stole by, she slept or seemed to sleep, the winds of night came vigorous from the deep with storm gusts of fresh-watered field and wold that breathed of ocean meadows bluely rolled. I drowsed in time past, stealing as for one whose drowsy life dreams in a villian. Vast bulks of black, wind-shattered wrack went down high casement squares of heaven, a crystal crown of bubbled moonlight on each monstrous head, like as great ghosts of giant kings long dead. And then, meseemed, she lightly laughed and sighed, so soft a taper had not bent aside, and leaned a soft face seen throw, loosened hair above me, whispering as if sweet in prayer, behold, the sword. I take the sword away. It curved and clashed where the strewn rushes lay, shone glassy, glittering like a watery beam of moonlight in the moonlight. I did deem she moved in sleep and dreamed, perverse, nor wist that which she did until two fierce lips kissed my wondering eyes to wakement of her thought. Then spake I, love, my word, is it then not? Nay, nay, my word albeit the sword be gone. And wouldst thou try me? Rest thou safe till dawn. I will not thus forswear. My word stands fast, but now I felt hot, desperate kisses cast on hair, eyes, throat and lips and over, low laughter of, sweet wretch. And thou, a lover? What is that word if she thou gavest it unbind thee of it? Lo, and she sees fit. Ah, Morgan, Morgan, then I knew 'twas thou, thou, who only could such joy allow. And, oh, unburied passion of that night, the sleepy birds too early piped of light, too soon came light girt with a rosy breeze, strong from his bath, to wrestle with the trees, a thewy hero, and, alas, too soon our scutcheoned oriel stained was overstrewn of dawn's air jewels. Then I sang a strain of sleep that in my memory strives again. Ethereal limbed the lovely sleep should sit, her starbeam locks with some vague splendor lit, like that the glow worm's emerald radiance sheds throw. Twilight dew drops globbed on lily beds. Her face is fair as if of graven stone, yet dim and airy us a cloud alone in the bare blue of heaven, smiling sweet, for languorous thoughts of love that flit and fleet short rainbow-winged about her crumpled hair. Yet on her brow a pensiveness more fair, ungraspable and sad and lost, I wist, than thoughts of maiden whom her love hath kissed, who knows, through deepening eyes and drowsy breath, him weeping bent while she drifts on to death. Full sweet and sorrowful and blithe withal should be her brow, not wholly spiritual, but tinged with mortal for the mortal mind, and smote with flushings from some Eden wind, hinting at heart's ease and a god's desire of pleasure hastening in a garb of fire. From some dim country over storied seas glassed of content and foamed of mysteries. Her ears two sea pearls morning tender pink, and strung to hearkening as if on a brink night with profundity of death and doubt, yet touched with awfulness of light poured out. Ears strung to palpitations of heart-throbs as seashells waver with dim ocean sobs. One hand, curved like a mist, on dusking skies, hollowing smooth brows to shade dark velvet eyes, dark lashed and dewed of tear drops beautiful, to sound the cowering conscience of the dull, sleep-sodden features in their human rest, ere she dare trust her pureness to that breast. Large limbs diaphanous and fleeced with veil of wimpled heat, wove of the pulsing pale of rosy midnight, and stained through with stars in golden cores, clusters of quivering bars of nebulous gold, twined round her fleecily. A lucid shape vague in vague mystery, untrammeled bosoms swelling free and white and prodigal of balm, cupped lilies bright, that to the famished mind yield their purer, best, voluptuous sleep like honey sucked in rest. Thus they communed, and there her castle stood with slender towers ivied o'er the wood, an ancient chapel creeper buried near, a forest vista, where faint herds of deer stalked like soft shadows, where the hares did run, mavis and throstle carolled in the sun. For it was Morgan's realm, embowered gore, that rookie pile her palace whence she bore with Urian's sway, but he at Camelot knew not of intrigues here. At chariot, too, noon, and the wistful autumn sat among the lurid woodlands, chiefs who now were wrung by crafty ministers, sun, wind and frost, to don imperial pomp at any cost. On each wild hill they stood as if for war flaunting barbaric raiment wide and far, and burnt-out lusts in aged faces raged, their tottering state by flattering zephyrs paged, who in a little fretful while, how soon, would work rebellion under some wan moon, pluck their old beards deriding, shriek and tear rich royalty, so tattered through the air their purple majesty, and from each head dash down its golden crown, and in its stead set there a pale death mockery of snow, leave them bemoaning beggars bowed with woe. Blow, wood wind, blow, now that all's fresh and fine as earth and wood can make it, fresh as brine and rare with sodden scents of underbrush. Ring, and one hears a cavalcade a rush, bold blare of horns, shrill music of steel bows, a horn. A horn, the hunt is up and goes beneath the acorn dropping oaks in green, dark woodland green, a boar spear held between his cell and hunter's head, and at his thigh a good, broad hanger, and one fist on high to wind the rapid echoes from his horn, that start the field birds from the sheaved corn, uphurled in volleys of audacious wings, that cease again when it no longer sings. Away, away, they flash a belted band from Camelot throw, that haze ghostly land, hounds leashed and lemurs and a flash of steel, a tramp of horse and the long baying peal of stag-hounds whimpering and, behold, the hart, a lordly height, doth from the covert dart, and the big bloodhounds strain unto the chase. A hunt, the price seems but a pace on ere 'tis wound, but now, where interlace the dense briared underwoods, the hounds have lost the slot, there where a forest brook hath crossed with intercepting waters full of leaves. Beyond, the hart a tangled labyrinth weaves through dimmer boskage, and the wizard sun shapes many shadowy stags that seem to run wild herds before the baffled foresters. And treed aloft a reckless laugh one hears, as if some helping goblin from the trees mocked them the unbayed hart and made a breeze his pursuivant of mocking. Hastening thence, pursued King Arthur and King Uriens with one small brachet, till scarce here could they their fellowship far furthered course away on fresher trace of hind or rugged boar with haggard, hairy flanks, curled tusks and hoar with fierce foam fury, and of these bereft the kings continued in the slot they'd left. And there the hart plunged gallant through the brake leaving a torn path shaking in his wake, down which they followed on throw, many a copse above whose brush, close on before, the tops of the large antlers swelled anon, and so were gone where beat the brambles to and fro. And still they drave him hard, and ever near seemed that great heart unwearied, and such cheer still stung them to the chase. When Arthur's horse gasped mightily and, lunging in his course lay dead, a lordly bay, and Uriens left his grey hunter dying near, and thence they held the hunt afoot. When suddenly were they aware of a wide, roughened sea, and near the wood the hart upon the sward bayed, panting unto death and winded hard. Right so the king dispatched him and the price wound on his hunting bugle clearly thrice. As if each echo, which that wild horn's blast waked from its sleep, the quietude had cast tender as mercy on it, in a band rose moving sounds of gladness hand in hand, came 12 fair damsels, sunny in sovereign white, from that red woodland gliding. These each knight graced with obeisance and, Our Lord, said one, tenders ye courtesy until the dawn, the Earl Sir Damus, well in his wide keep, seen thither with due worship, ye shall sleep. And then they came o'erwearied to a hall, an owlet-haunted pile, whose weedy wall towered based on crags rough, windy turrets high, an old, gaunt giant castle, 'gainst a sky wherein the moon hung foam faced, large and full. Down on dank sea foundations broke the dull, weird monotone of ocean, and wide rolled the watery wilderness that was as old as loud, defying headlands stretching out beneath still stars with a voluminous shout of wreck and wrath forever. Here the two were feasted fairly and with worship due all errant knights, and then a damsel led each knight with flaring lamp unto his bed down separate corridors of that great keep, and soon they rested in a heavy sleep. And then King Arthur woke, and woke mid groans of dolorous knights, and, round him lay the bones of many waffle champions mouldering, and he could hear the open ocean ring wild wasted waves above. And so he thought, it is some nightmare weighing me, distraught by that long hunt, and then he sought to shake the horror off and to himself awake, but still he heard sad groans and whispering sighs, and deep in iron-ribbed cells the eyes of pale, cadaverous knights shone fixed on him unhappy, and he felt his senses swim with foulness of that cell, and, what are ye? Ghosts of chained champions or a company of phantoms, bodiless fiends? If speak ye can, speak, in God's name, for I am here, a man. Then groaned the shaggy throat of one who lay, a dusky nightmare dying day by day, yet once of comely mien and strong withal and greatly gracious, but, now hunger tall, with scrawny beard and faded hands and cheeks. Sir Knight, said he, know that the wretch who speaks is but an one of 20 knights here shamed of him who lords this castle, Damus named, who muses here for slow starvation keen. Around you fade the bones of some 18 tried knights of Britain, and God grant that soon my hunger-lengthened ghost will see the moon, beyond the vileness of this prisonment. With that he sighed, and round the dungeon went a rustling sigh, like saddened sin, and so another dim, thin voice complained their woe. Heedeth and chaineth with this common end, that he find one who will his prowess bend to the attainment of his livelihood. A younger brother, Oncelake, hath he, good and courteous, withal most noble, whom this Damus hates, yea, ever seeks his doom, denying him to their estate all right save that he holds by main of arms and might. And through puissance hath he some fat fields and one rich manor sumptuous, where he yields belated knights hosts hospitality. Then bold is Oncelake, Damus cowardly, for Oncelake would decide by sword and lance body for body this inheritance, but Damus dotes on life so courageless, thus on all knights perforce lays coward stress to fight for him or starve. For ye must know that in his country he is hated so that no helm here is who will take the fight, thus fortunes it are. Plight is such a plight. Quoth he and ceased, and wondering at the tale the king was thoughtful, and each faded, pale, poor countenance still conned him when he spake. And what reward if one this battle take? Deliverance for all if of us one consent to be his party's champion. But treachery and here so close kin we loathe the part as some misshapen sin, and here would rather dally on to death than serving falseness save and slave our breath. May God deliver you for mercy, sirs? And right anon an iron noise he hears of chains clanked loose and bars jarred rusty back, the heavy gate croak open, and the black of that rank cell astonished was with light, that danced fantastic with the frantic night. One high torch sidewise, worried by the gust sun that lorn den of hunger, death and rust, and one tall damsel vaguely vestured, fair with shadowy hair, poised on the rocky stair. And laughing on the king, what cheer? Said she. God's life. The keep stinks vilely, and to see so noble knights endungeoned hollowing here doth pain me sore with pity, but, what cheer? Thou mockest us, for me, the sorriest since I was suckled, and of any quest to me the most imperiling and strange. But what wouldst thou? Said Arthur. She, a change I offer thee, through thee to these with thee, and thou but grant me in love's courtesy to fight for Damus and his livelihood. And if thou wilt not, look, thou seest this brood of lean and dwindled bellies spectre-eyed, keen knights erst who refused me, so decide. Then thought the king of the sweet sky, the breeze that blew delirious over waves and trees, thick fields of grasses and the sunny earth whose beating heat filled the red heart with mirth, and made the world one sovereign pleasure-house where king and serf might revel and carouse. Then of the hunt on autumn plaintive hills, lone forest chapels by their radiant rills, his palace rich at Caerleon upon Usk, and Camelot's loud halls that throw, the dusk blazed far and bloomed a rose of revelry, or in the misty morning shadowy loomed grave for audience. And then he thought of his round table and that Grail wide sought in haunted holds on demon's sinful shore, then marveled of what wars would rise and roar with dragon heads unconquered and devour this realm of Britain and pluck up that flower of chivalry whence ripened his renown, and then the reign of some besotted crown, a bandit king of lust, idolatry, and with that thought for tears he could not see. Then of his greatest champions, King Ban's son, and Galahad and Tristram, Accolon, and then, ah God, of his dear Guinevere, and with that thought, to starve and moulder here. For, being unfriend to Arthur and his court, well wist he this grim earl would bless that sport of fortune which had fortuned him so well to have to starve his sovereign in a cell in the entombing rock where ground the deep, and all the life shut in his limbs did leap throw, eager veins and sinews fierce and red, stung on to action, and he rose and said, That which thou askest is right hard, but, lo, to rot here harder, I will fight his foe. But, mark, I have no weapons and no mail, no steed against that other to avail. Fear not for that, and thou shalt lack none, sire. And so she led the path, her torch's fire scaring wild spidery shadows at each stride from cobwebbed coigns of scowling passes wide, that labyrinthed the rock foundations strong of that ungainly fortress bleak of wrong. At length they came to a nail-studded door, which she unlocked with one harsh key she bore mid many keys bunched at her girdle. Thence they issued on a terraced eminence. Beneath the sea broke sounding, and the king breathed open air that had the smell and sting of brine morn vigored and blue-billowed foam, for in the east the second dawning's gloam, since that unlucky chase, was freaked with streaks red as the ripe stripes of an apple's cheeks. And so within that larger light of dawn it seemed to Arthur now that he had known this maiden at his court, and so he asked. But she, well tutored, her real person, masked, and answered falsely. Nay, deceive thee not. Thou saw'st me ne'er at Arthur's court, I wot. For here it likes me best to sing and spin and work the hangings my sire's halls within. No courts or tournaments or gallants brave to flatter me and love. For me, the wave, the forest, field and sky, the calm, the storm, my garth wherein I walk to think, the charm of uplands redolent at bounteous noon and full of sunlight, night's free stars and moon, white ships that pass some several every year, these lonesome towers and those wild mews to hear. An owlet maid, the king laughed, but, untrue was she, and of false Morgan's treasonous crew, who worked vile wiles even to the slaying of the king, half-brother, whom she did not love. And presently she brought him where in state this swarthy Damus with mailed coward sat. King Urience that dawning woke and found himself safe couched at Camelot and wound in Morgan's arms, nor weened he how it was that this thing secretly had come to pass. But Accolon at chariot sojourned still content with his own dreams, for 'twas the will of Morgan thus to keep him hidden here for her desire's excess, where everywhere in Gore by wood and river pleasure houses, pavilions, rows of rock for love carouses, and there in one, where 'twas her dearest wont to list a tinkling, falling water fount, which throw sweet talks of idle paramours at sensuous ease on tumbled beds of flowers, had caught a laughing language light thereof, and rambled ever gently whispering, love. On cool white walls her hands had deftly draped a dark rich hanging, where were worked and shaped her fullest hours of pleasure flesh and mind, imperishable passions, which could wind the past and present quickly, and could mate dead loves to kisses, and intoxicate with moon-soft words of past delight and song the heavy heart that wronged forgot the wrong, and there beside it pooled the Ernade well, and slipping thence throw, dripping shadows fell from rippling rock to rock. Here Accolon, with Morgan's hollow lute, one studious dawn came solely, with not even her brindled hound to leap beside him o'er the gleaming ground, no handmaid lovely of his loveliest fair, or paging dwarf in purple with him. there. But this her lute, about which her perfume clung odorous of memories, that made bloom her flowing features rosy to his eyes, that saw the words, his sense could but surmise, shaped on dim, breathing lips. The laugh that drunk her deep soul fire from eyes wherein it sunk and slowly waned away to smoldering dreams, fathomless with thought, far in their dove-gray gleams. And so for those most serious eyes and lips, faint, filmy features, all the music slips a buoyant being bubbling to his voice to chant her praises, and with nervous poise his fleet, trained fingers call from her long lute such riotous notes as must make madly mute the nightingale that listens quivering. And well he knows that winging hence it'll sing these aching notes, whose beauties burn and pain its anguished heart now sobless, not in vain wild, 'neath her casement in that garden old dingled with heavy roses, in the gold of Camelot's stars and pearl-encrusted moon. And if it dies, the heartache of the tune shall clamor stormy passion at her ear, of death more dear than life if love be there, melt her quick eyes to tears, her throat to sobs tumultuous heaved, while separation throbs hard at her heart, and longing rears to death two prayerful eyes of pleading, for one breath, an ardor of fierce life, crushed in his arms close, close. And, oh, for such, all these smooth charms, full, sentient charms voluptuous evermore. And sweet to know these sensitive vows shall soar even to the dull ear of her drowsy lord beside her, heart-defying with each word harped in the bird's voice rhythmically clear. And thus he sang to her who was not there, she comes. Her presence, like a moving song breathed soft of loveliest lips and lute-like tongue, sways all the gurgling forests from their rest. I fancy where her rustling foot is pressed, so faltering, love seems timid, but how strong that darling love that flutters in her breast. She comes, and the green vistas are stormed through, as if wild wings, wet varnished with dripped dew, had dashed a sudden sunbeam tempest past, with her eyes inspiration clearly chased, a rhythmic lavishment of bright grey blue, long arrows of her eyes perfection cast. Ah, God, she comes, and, love, I feel thy breath, like the soft south who idly wandereth through musical leaves of laughing laziness, page on before her, how sweet, none can guess. To say my soul, here's harmony dear as death to sigh wild vows, or utterless, to bless. She comes, ah, God, and all my brain is brave to war for words to laud her and to lave her queenly beauty in such vows whereof may hush melodious cooings of a dove, for her light feet the favored path to pave with oaths, like roses, raving mad with love. She comes, in me a passion, as the moon works madness in strong men, my blood doth swoon towards her glory, and I feel her soul cling lip to lip with mine, and now the whole mix with me, aching like a tender tune exhausted, lavished in a god's control. She comes, ah, Christ, ye eager stars that grace the fragmentary skies, that dimple space, clink, and I hear her harp's sweet footfalls come. Ah, wood indulging, violet vague perfume, art of her presence, of her wild flower face, that like some gracious blossom stains the gloom? Oh, living exultation of the blood, that now, as sunbursts, the almighty mood of some moved god, scatter the storm that roars, and hush, her love like some spent splendor pours into it all immaculate maidenhood, and all the heart that hesitates, adores. Vanquished, so vanquished, ah, triumphant sweet, the height of heaven, supine at thy feet, where love feasts crowned, and basks in such a glare as hearts of suns burn, in thine eyes and hair, unutterable with ravelled fires that cheat the ardent clay of me and make me air. And so, rare witch, thy blood, like some lewd wine, shall subtly make me, like thee, half divine, and, sweet rebellion, clasp thee till thou urge to combat close of savage kisses, surge a war that rubies all thy proud cheeks shine, slain, struggling blushes, till white truce emerge. My life for thine, thus bartered lip to lip, a striving being, pulsant, that shall slip like song and flame incense from thee to me, nor held, but quick rebartered thence to thee, so our two loves be as a single ship, 10,000 loves as one eternally. Babbled the woodland like a rocky brook, and as the ecstasy of foliage shook, hot pieces of bright, sunny heavens glanced like polished silver through, pale leaves that danced, as one hath seen some green-gowned huntress fair, morn in her cheeks and midnight in her hair, eyes clear as hollow dews, clean limbs as lithe as limbs swift morning moves, a voice as blithe as high hawks ringing through the falling dews, pant through the bramble-matted avenues, where briar and thorn have gashed her gown's pinched green, about bright breasts and arms, the milky sheen of white skin healthy pouting out, her face, ardent and flushed, fixed on the lordly chase. 3. The eve now came, and shadows cowled the way like somber palmers, who have kneeled to pray beside a wayside shrine, and rosy rolled up the capacious west a grainy gold, luxuriant fluid, burned through strong, keen skies, which seemed as towering gates of paradise surged dim, far glories on the hungry gaze. And from that sunset down the roseate ways, to Accolon, who with his idle lute, reclined in reverie against a root of a great oak, a fragment of that west, a dwarf, in crimson satin tightly dressed, skipped like a leaf the rather frosts have burned and cozened to a fever red, that turned and withered all its sap, and this one came from Camelot, from his beloved dame, Morgan the Fay. He on his shoulder bore a burning blade wrought strange with wizard lore, runed mystically, and a scabbard which glared venomous, with angry jewels rich. He, lauding to the knight, "Sir knight," said he, "your lady with all sweetest courtesy assures you, unworthy messenger I of such brightness, of that love of her." Then doffing that great baldric, with the sword to him he gave, and this from him, my lord King Arthur, even his Excalibur, the sovereign blade, which Merlin gat of her, the Lady of the Lake, who Launcelot fostered from infanthood, as well you wot, in some weird mere in Brion's tangled lands of charms and mist, where filmy fairy bands by lazy moons of autumn spin their fill of giddy Maurice on the frosty hill. By goodness of her favor this is sent, who craved King Arthur boon with this intent, that soon for her a desperate combat one with one of mightier prowess were begun, and with the sword Excalibur right sure were she against that champion to endure the blade flame trenchant, but more prize the sheath which stauncheth blood and guardeth from all death, he said, and Accolon looked on the sword, a mystic falchion, and, it shall wend hard with him throw, the unconquerable blade, whoe'er he be, who on my queen hath laid stress of unworship, and the hours as slow as palsied hours in purgatory go for those unmasked, till I have slain this foe. My purse, sweet page, and now, to her who gave, dispatch, and this, to all commands, her slave, to death obedient. In love or war her love to make me all the warrior. Plead her grace mercy for so long delay from love that dies an hourly death each day till her white hands kissed he shall kiss her face, by which his life breathes in continual grace. Thus he commanded, and incontinent the dwarf departed like a red ray sent from rich down flowering clouds of suffused light winged o'er long, purple glooms, and with the night, whose votaress cypress stole the dying strife softly of day, and for whose perished life gave heaven her golden stars, in dreamy thought wends Accolon to hazy chariot. And it befell him, wandering one dawn, as was his wont, across a dew-drenched lawn, glad with night freshness and elastic health in sky and earth that lavished worlds of wealth from heady breeze and racy smells, a knight and lofty lady met he, gay bedight, with following of 6 esquires, and they held on straight wrists the jest gerfalcon grey, and rode a hawking o'er the leas of Gore from Onsilake's manor, where he languished, sore hurt in the lists, a spear thrust in his thigh, who had besought, for much he feared to die, this knight and his fair lady, as they rode to hawk near chariot, the queen's abode, that they would pray her in all charity fair post to him, for in chirurgery of all that land she was the greatest leech, and her to his recovery beseech. So, Accolon saluted, they drew rein, and spake their message, for right over fain were they toward their sport, that he might bear petition to that lady. But, not there was Arthur's sister, as they well must wot, but now a se'nnight lay at Camelot, of Guinevere the guest, and there with her 4 other queens of farther Britain were, Iseult of Ireland, she of Cornwall queen, King Mark's wife, who right rarely then was seen at court for jealousy of Mark, who knew her to that lance of lioness how true since mutual quaffing of a philter, while how guilty Guinevere on such could smile, she of Northgales and she of Eastland, and she of the Out Isles queen. A fairer band for sovereignty and love and loveliness was not in any realm to grace and bless. Then quoth the knight, I see how fortune turns and varies like an April day, that burns now welkins blue with calm, now scowls them down, revengeful, with a black storm's wrinkled frown. For, look, this Damus, who so long hath lain a hiding vermin, fearful of all pain, dark in his bandit towers by the deep, wakes from a 5 years' torpor and asleep, so sends dispatch. A courier to my lord with, lo, behold, Tomorrow with the sword Earl Damus by his knight at point of lance decides the issue of inheritance, body to body, or by champion. Right hard to find such ere tomorrow dawn. Though sore bestead lies Oncelake, and he could, right fain were he to save his livelihood. Then mused Sir Accolon, the adventure goes even as my lady fashioneth. Who knows but what her arts develop this and make? And thus to those, his battle I will take, and he be so conditioned, harried of estate and life, in knighthood and for love. Conduct me thither. And, gramercied, then mounted a void horse of that wandering train, and thence departed with 2 squires. And they came to a lone, dismantled priory hard by a castle grey on whose square towers, machicolated, o'er the forest's bowers, the immemorial morning bloomed and blushed. A woodland manor olden, dark embushed in wild and woody hills. And then one wound in each oy horn, and with the boundless sound the drawbridge rumbled moatward clanking, and into a paved court passed that little band. When all the world was morning, gleam and glare of far deluging glory, and the air sang with the woodbird, like a humming lyre swept bold of minstrel fingers wire on wire. Ere that fixed hour of prime came Arthur armed for battle royally. A black steed warmed a fierce impatience, neath him cased in mail, huge, foreign, and accoutred head to tail in costly sendal, rearward wine dark red, amber as sunlight to his fretful head. Firm, heavy armor blue had Arthur on beneath a robe of honor, like the dawn, satin and diapered and perflued deep with lordly golden purple, whence did sweep 2 hanging acorn tuftings of fine gold, and at his thigh a falchion, long and bold, heavy and triple-edged, its scabbard, red cordovan leather, thence a baldric lead of new-cut deer skin. This laborious wrought, and curiously with slides of gold was fraught, and buckled with a buckle white that shone, bone of the seahorse, tongued with jet-black bone. And, sapphire set, a burgonet of gold barbaric, wyvern crested whose throat rolled a flame-sharp tongue of agate, and whose eyes glowed venomous great rubies fierce of prize. And in his hand, a wiry lance of ash, ladened with finest silver, like a flash of sunlight in the morning shone agash. Clad was his squire most richly, he whose head curled with close locks of yellow tinged to red, of noble bearing, fair face, hawk eyes keen, and youthful, bearded chin. Right well beseen, scarfed with blue satin, on his shoulder strong one broad gold brooch chased. Strangely, thick and long, his legs in hose of rarest tautness clad, and party-colored leathern shoes he had gold latched, and in his hand a bannered spear speckled and bronzen sharpened in the air. So with his following, while lay like scars the blue mist thin along the woodland bars, throw, dew and fog, throw, shadow and throw, ray joustward Earl Damus led the forest way. Then to King Arthur when arrived were these to where the lists shone silken throw, the trees, bannered and draped, a wimpled damsel came, secret, upon a palfrey all aflame with sweat and heat of hurry, and, from her, your sister Morgan, your Excalibur, with tender greeting. For ye well have need in this adventure of him. So, God-speed, and so departed suddenly, nor knew the king but this his weapon tried and true, but brittle this and fashioned like thereof, and false a baser metal, in unlove and treason to his life, of her of kin half-sister, Morgan, an unnatural sin. Then heralded into the lists he rode. Opposed flashed Accolon, who light bestrode, exultant, proud in talisman of that sword, a dun horse lofty as a haughty lord, pure white about each hollow, pasterned hoof. Equipped shone knight and steed in arms of proof, dappled with yellow variegated plate of Spanish Latin. And of sovereign state his surcoat robe of honor white and black of satin, red silk needled front and back then blackly bordered. And above his robe that 2-edged sword, a throbbing golden globe of vicious jewels, thrust its burning hilt, its broad belt, tawny and with gold work gilt, clasped with the eyelid of a black seahorse whose tongue was rosy gold. And stern as force his visored helmet burned like fire, of rich and bronzen latten hammered, and on which 100 crystals glittered, thick as on a silver web bright studding dews of dawn. The casque's tail cresta, taloned griffin ramped, in whose horned brow one virtuous jewel stamped. An ashen spear round shafted, overlaid with fine blue silver, whereon colors played, firm in his iron gauntlet lively swayed. Intense on either side an instant stood glittering as serpents which, with spring renewed, in glassy scales meet on some greening way, angry advance, quick tongues at poisonous play. Then clanged a herald's clarion and sharp heels, harsh spurred, Each champion's springing courser feels touched to red onset. The aventured spears hurled like two sunbursts of a storm when clears laborious thunders, and in middle course shrieked shrill the unpierced shields. Mailed horse from horse lashed madly pawing, and a hoarse roar rang from buckram. Lists, till the wild echoes sang of leagues on leagues of forest and of cliff. Rigid the proof-shelled warriors passed and stiff whither their squires' fresher spears upheld, nor stayed to breathe, but scarcely firmly selled launched deadly forward. Shield to savage shield opposing, crest to crest, whose fronts did wield a towering war's unmercifulest escath, rocking. Undaunted, glared wan withering wrath from balls of jeweled eyes, and raging stood slim, slippery bodies, in the sun like blood. The lance of Accolon, as on a rock-long storm-launched foam breaks baffled, with the shock, on Arthur's sounding shield burst splintered force, but him resistless Arthur's, high from horse cell lifted, ruinous bear crashing on a long sword's length. Unsaddled Accolon for one stunned moment lay, then rising, drew the great sword at his hip, that shone like dew fresh flashed in morn. Descend, he stiffly said, to proof of better weapons head for head. Enough of spears, to swords. And so the knight addressed him to the king. Dismounting light, Arthur his moon bright brand unsheathed, and high each covering. Shield gleamed slanting to the sky, relentless, strong, and stubborn. Underneath their wary shelters foined the glittering death of stolid steel thrust livid arm to arm. As cloud to cloud growls up a soaring storm above the bleak wood and lithe lightnings work brave blades wild warring, in the black that lurk, thus fenced and thrust, one tortoise shield descends, leaps a fierce sword shrill, like a flame which sends a long fang heavenward, for a crushing stroke. Swings hard and trenchant, and, resounding heard, sings surly helmward full. Defiance reared soars to a brother blow to shriek again blade on brave blade. And o'er the battered plain, forward and backward, blade on baleful blade, teeth clenched as visors where the fierce eyes made a cavernous, smoldering fury, shield at shield, unflinchingly remained and scorned to yield. So Arthur drew aside to rest upon his falchion for a pause. But Accolon as yet, throw, virtue of that magic sheath fresh and almighty, being no nearer death throw, loss of blood than when the trial begun, chafed with delay. But Arthur with the sun, its thirsty heat, the loss from wounds of blood, leaned fainting weary and so resting stood. Cried Accolon, here's no time for rest. Defend thee. And straight on the monarch pressed. Defend or yield thee as one recreant. Full on his helm a hewing blow did plant, which beat a flying fire from the steel. Smote, like one drunk with wine, the king did reel, breath, brain bewildered. Then, infuriate, nerve stung with vigor by that blow, in hate gnarled all his strength into one stroke of might, and in both fists the huge blade knotted tight, swung red, terrific to a sundering stroke. As some bright wind that hurls uprooted oak, boomed full the beaten burgonet he wore, hacked throw, the crest, and cleanly shore the golden boasting of its griffin fierce with hollow clamor down astounded ears, no further thence, but, shattered to the grass, that brittle blade, crushed as if made of glass, into hot pieces like a broken ray burst sunward and in feverish fragments lay. Then groaned the king unarmed, and so he knew this no Excalibur, that tried and true most perfect tempered, ruined and mystical. Sobbed, oh, hell false, betray me. Then withal him seemed this foe, who fought with so much stress, so long untiring, and with no distress of wounds or heat, through treachery bare his brand, and then he knew it by its hilt that hand clutched to an avenging stroke. For Accolon in madness urged the belted battle on his king defenseless, who, the hilted cross of that false weapon grasped, beneath the boss of his deep dented shield crouched, and around crawled the unequal conflict o'er the ground, sharded with shattered spears and off-hewn bits of shivered steel and gold that burnt in fits. So hunted, yet defiant, cowering beneath his bossy shield's defense, the king persisted stoutly. And, devising still how to secure his sword and by what skill, him so it fortuned when most desperate. In that hot chase they came where shattered late lay tossed the truncheon of a bursten lance, which deftly seized, to Accolon's advance he wielded valorous. Against the fist smote where the gauntlet husked the nervous wrist, which strained the weapon to a wrathful blow. Palsied, the tightened sinews of his foe loosened from effort, and, the falchion seized, easy was yielded. Then the wroth king squeezed, hurling the moon disk of his shield afar, him in both knotted arms of wiry war, rocked sidewise twice or thrice, as one hath seen some stern storm take an ash tree, roaring green, nodding its sappy bulk of trunk and boughs to dizziness, from tough, coiled roots carouse its long height thundering. So King Arthur shook Sir Accolon and headlong flung, then took, tearing away, that scabbard from his side, tossed thro' the breathless lists, that far and wide gulped in the battle voiceless. Then right wroth secured Excalibur, and grasped of both wild hands swung glittering and brought bitter down on rising Accolon, steel, bone and brawn hewed thro' that blow, unsettled every sense. Bathed in a world of blood his limbs grew tense and writhen, then ungathered limp with death. Bent to him Arthur, from the brow beneath, unlaced the helm and doffed it, and so asked, when the fair forehead's hair curled dark uncast, say, ere I slay thee, whence and what thou art? What king, what court be thine? And from what part? Speak, or thou diest. Yet, that brow, methinks I have beheld it, where? Say, ere death drinks the soul light from life's cups, thine eyes. Thou art. What art thou? Speak. He answered slow and short with tortured breathing. I? One, Accolon of Gaul, a knight of Arthur's court, at dawn. God wot what now I am for love so slain. Then seemed the victor spasmed with keen pain, covered with melee'd hands his visored face. Thou Accolon? Art Accolon? A space exclaimed and conned him. Then asked softly, say, whence gattest thou this sword, or in what way thou hadst it? Speak. But wandering that night heard dully, senses clotted thick with night. Then rallying earthward, woe, woe worth the sword, from love of love who lives. For love yet Lord, Morgan, thy love for love and love hadst made me strong o'er kings an hundred. To have swayed Britain, had this not risen like a fate, spawned up, a hell's miscarriage sired of hate. A king? Thou curse! A gold and blood-crowned king, with Arthur's sister queen. 'Twas she who schemed. And there at chariot we loved and dreamed gone some 12 months. There so we had devolved how Arthur's death were compassed and resolved each liberal morning, like an almoner, prodigal of silver to the begging air. Each turbulent eve that in heaven's turquoise rolled convulsive fiery glories deep in gold. Each night, hilarious heavens vast of night. Boisterous with quivering stars buoyed bubble light in flexuous labyrinths. Oh the intricate sphere, we dreamed and spake ambition at our ear, nay. A crowned curse and crimeful clad she came, to me, that woman, brighter than a flame, and laughed on me with pouting lips up-pursed for kisses which I gave for love. How cursed was I thereafter! For, lie fleshed in truth, she shrivels to a hag. Behind that youth ugly, misshapen, lust not love, wherein germs pregnant seed of hell for hate and sin. I seek for such the proudest height of seat, King Arthur's kingdom, and bold fame complete? Harlot! Sweet spouse of Uriens king of Gore, sweet harlot, here's that death determined o'er. And now thou hast thy dream, and dreaming grieve that death so ruins it? Thy mouth to shrieve. Nay, nay, I love thee. Witness bear this field, I love thee, heart, dost love her and yet yield? A now, so hail me hence to die. Then anger in the good king's gloomy eye burnt, instant embered, as one oft may see a star leak out of heaven and cease to be. Slow from his visage he his visor raised, and on the dying one mute moment gazed, then low bespake him grimly. Accolon, I am that king. He with an awful groan, blade battered as he was, beheld anew. Strained to his tottering knees and haggard drew up full his armored tallness, hoarsely cried, the king, and at his mailed feet clashed and died. Then rose a world of anxious faces pressed about King Arthur, who, though wound distressed, bespake that multitude, whiles breath and power remain. Judge we these brethren. This harsh hour hath yielded Damus all this rich estate, so it is his, allotted his of fate throw, might of arms, so let it be to him. For, stood our oath on knighthood not so slim but that it hath this strong conclusion. This much by us as errant knight is done, now our decree as king of Britain, here, we do adjudge this Damus band. Forere, outlawed and exiled from all shores and isles of farthest Britain in its many miles. 1 month be his, no more. Then will we come even with an iron host to seal his doom. If he be not departed overseas, hang naked from his battlements to please of carrion ravens and wild hawks the craws. Thus much for Damus, but our pleasure draws toward Sir Ontzlake, whom it likes the king to take into his nightly following of that round table royal. Stand our word, but I am overwary, take my sword, unharness me, For, battle-worn, I tire with bruises, achings and wounds, mad with fire, and monastery ward would I right fain, even Glastonbury, and with me the slain. So bear they then the wounded king away, the dead behind. So closed the autumn day. But when within that abbey he waxed strong, the king, remembering him of all the wrong that Damus had inflicted on the land, commanded Lionel with a staunch band this weeds out stamping if still rooted there. He riding thither to that robber lair, led Arthur's hopefullest helms, when thorn on thorn reddened and 100 spears one winter morn built up, a bulk of bastioned rock on rock, vast battlements, that loomed above the shock of freshening foam that climbed with hailing hands, lone cloudy clustered turrets in loud lands set desolate, mournful o'er wide, frozen flats, found hollow towers the haunt of owls and bats. Hate, born of wrath and mother red of crime, in hell was whelped ere the hot hands of time, artificer of God, had coined one world from formless forms of void and, round it furled its lordly raiment of the day and night, and germed its womb for seasons throwed with might, and hell sent hate to man to hate or use, to serve itself by serving and amuse. For her half-brother Morgan had conceived a morbid hatred, in that much she grieved, envious and jealous, for that high renown and majesty the king for his fast crown throw, worship had acquired. And once he said, the closest kin to state are those to dread, no honor such to crush, envenoming all those kind tongues of blood that try to sing petition to the soul, while conscience quakes huddled, but stern to hearts whose cold pride takes. And well she knew that Arthur, mightier than Accolon, without Excalibur were as a stingless hornet in the joust with all his foreign weapons. So her trust smiled certain of conclusion. Eloquent gave lofty heart bold hope that at large eyes piled up imperial dreams of power and prize. And in her carven chamber, oaken dark, traceried and arrased o'er the barren park that dripped with autumn, for November lay swathed frostily in fog on every spray, thought at her tri-arched casement lone, one night, ere yet came knowledge of that test of might. Her lord in slumber and the castle dull with silence or with sad wind music full. And he removed? Fond fool! He is removed, death dull from feet to hair and graveward shoved from royalty to that degraded state but purpler pomp. But, see, regenerate another monarch rises, Accolon. Love, with state more ermined, balmy son of gods not men, and nobler hence to rule. Sweet love almighty, terrible to school harsh hearts to gentleness. Then all this realm's iron-husked flower of war, which overwhelms with rust and havoc, shall explode and bloom an asphodel of peace with joy's perfume. And then, sweet Launcelots and sweet Tristrams proud, sweet Guineveres, sweet Isouds, now allowed no pleasures but what weary, stolen hours in golden places have their flaming flowers, shall have curled feasts of passion evermore. Pour out thrust love, now shivering at the door, no longer, sweet. Neglected, thou thrust off, insulted and derided, nor the scoff of bully power, whose heart of insult flings off for the roar of arms the appeal that clings and lifts a tearful, prayerful pitiful face up from his brutal feet. This shrine where grace lays woman's life for every sacrifice, to him so little, yet of what pure price, her all, being all her all for love. Her soul life, honor, earth and firmamental whole of God's glad universe, stars, moon and sun, creation, death, life ended, life begun. And if by fleshly love all heavens debarred, its sinuous revolving spheres instarred, then hell were heaven with love to those who knew love which God's heaven encouraged, love that drew hips, head and hair in fiends' devouring claws. Down its pits hurled sucking, as down draws, yet lip to narrow lip with whom we love, a whirlwind some weak, crippled, fallen dove. Then this lank Urience? He who is Lord, where is thy worry, for, hath he no sword? No dangerous dagger eye, hid softly here sharp as an adder's fang? Or for that ear no instant poison which insinuates, tightens quick pulses? While one breathing waits, with ice and death? For often men who sleep on eider down wake not, but closely keep such secrets in their graves to rot to dust and maggots. Of these, which is lot? Thus she conspired with her that rainy night lone in her chamber, when no haggard, white, wan, watery moon dreamed on the streaming pane, but on the leads beat in incessant rain, and sighed and moaned a weary wind along the turrets and torn poplars stirred to song. So grew her face severe as skies that take dark forces of full storm, sound-shod, that shake with murmurous feet black hills, and stab with fire a pine some moaning forest mourns as sire. So touched her countenance that dark intent, and to still eyes stern thoughts a passion sent, as midnight waters luminous glass deep suggestive worlds of austere stars in sleep, vague ghostly grey locked in their hollow gloom. Then as if some vast wind had swept the room, silent, intense, had raised her from her seat, of dim, great arms had made her a retreat, secret as love to move in, like some ghost, noiseless as death and subtle as sharp frost. Poised like a light and borne as carefully, trod she the gusty hall where shadowy the stirring hangings rolled a pagan war. And there the mail of Uriance shone, a star, glimmering above, a dying crescent dropped from the stone vault and flared. And here she stopped and took the sword bright, burnished by his page, and ruddy as a flame with restless rage. Grasping this death, unto the chamber where slept innocent her spouse she moved, and ere twined in soft, glossy sendal, or a fit of fairy song a wicked charm in it, a spell that sings seductive unto death. Then paused she at one chamber, for a breath listened, and here her son Sir Ewain slept, he who of ravens a black army kept, in war than fiercest men more terrible, that tore forth eyes of kings who blinded fell. Sure that he slept, to Uriance stole and stood dim by his couch. About her heart hot blood caught strangling, then throbbed thudding fever up to her broad eyes, like wine whirled in a cup. Then came rare recollection, with a mouth sweet as the honeyed sunbeams of the south trickling through, perplexed ripples of low leaves, to whose faint form a veil of starshine cleaves intricate gauze from memoried eyes to feet, feet sandaled with crushed, sifted snows and fleet to come and go in airy anxiously. She, trembling to her, like a flower a bee nests in and makes an audible mouth of musk dripping a downy language in the dusk, laid lips to ears and looted memories of now hateful Uriance, her maiden love, that willing went from Caerleon to Gore one dazzling day of autumn. How a boar, wild as the wonder of the blazing wood, raged at her from a cavernous solitude, which, crimson creepered, yawned the bristling curse murderous upon her. How her steed waxed worse and, snorting terror, fled unmanageable, pursued with fear, and flung her from the cell, soft slipping on a bank of springy moss that couched her swooning. In an utter loss of mind and limbs she only knew 'twas thus, as one who pants beneath an incubus. The boar thrust toward her a tusked snout and fanged of hideous bristles, and the whole wood clanged and buzzed and boomed a thousand sounds and lights lawless about her brain, like leaves fierce nights of hurricane harvest shouting. Then she knew a fury thunder twixt it, and fleet flew rich-rooted moss and sandy loam that held dark-buried shadows of the wild, and swelled continual echoes with the thud of strife, and breath of man and brute that warred for life, and all the air, made mad with foam and forms, spun froth and wrestled twixt her hair and arms, while trampled caked the stricken leaves are shred hummed whirling, and snapped brittle branches dead. And when she rose and leaned her throbbing head, which burst its uncoiffed rays of raven hair down swelling shoulders pure and faultless fair, on one milk, marvelous arm of fluid grace, beheld the brute thing throttled in the face of angry Uriance over, browed like might, one red, swollen arm, that pinned the hairy fright, strong as a god's, iron at the gullet's brawn, dug in his midriff, the close knees drawn wedged deep the glutton sides that quaked and strove a shaggy bulk, whose sharp hoofs horny drove. Thus man and brute burned bent. When Uriance slipped one arm, the horror's tearing tusks had ripped and ribboned redly, to the dagger's hilt, which at his hip hung long a haft. Gold gilt, its rapid splinter drew, beamed twice and thrice high in the sun its ghastliness of ice plunged, and the great boar, stretched in sullen death, weakened through wild veins, groaned laborious breath. And how he brought her water from a well that rustled freshness near them, as it fell from its full mantled urn, in his deep cask, and prayed her quaff, then bathed her brow, a task that had accompanying tears of joy and vows of love, sweet intercourse of eyes and brows, and many clinging kisses eloquent. And how, when dressed his arm, behind him bent she clasped him on the same steed and they went on thro' the gold wood toward the golden west, till on one low hill's forest-covered crest up in the gold his castle's battlements pressed. And then she felt she'd loved him till had come fame of the love of Isoud, whom from home brought nightly Tristram o'er the Irish foam, and Guinevere's for Launcelot of the Lake. And then how passion from these seemed to wake longing for some great gallant who would slake, and such found Accolon. And then she thought how far she'd fallen and how darkly fraught with consequence was this. Then what distress were hers and his, her lovers, and success how doubly difficult if Arthur slain, King Uriens lived to assert his right to reign. So paused she pondering on the blade, her lips breathless and close as close cold fingertips hugged the huge weapon's hilt. And so she sighed, nay, long, too long hast lived who shouldst have died even in the womb abortive, who these years hast leashed sweet life to care with stinging tears, a knot thus harshly severed. As thou art into the elements naked. O'er his heart the long sword hesitated, lean as crime, descended redly once. And like a rhyme of nice words fairly fitted forming on, a sudden ceasing and the harmony gone, so ran to death the life of Uriens, a strong song incomplete a broken sense. There glowered the crimeful queen, the glistening sword unfleshed, flung by her wronged and murdered lord, and the dark blood spread broader throw, the sheet to drip a horror at impassive feet and blur the polished oak. But lofty she stood proud, relentless, in her ecstasy a lovely devil, a crowned lust that cried on Accolon, that harlot which defied heaven with a voice of pulses clamorous as steep storm that down a cavernous mountain pass blasphemes in hundred echoes. With like power the inner harlot called its paramour, him whom King Arthur had commanded, when born from the lists, be granted her again as his blithe gift and welcome from that joust, for treacherous love and her adulterous lust. And while she stood revolving how her deeds' concealment were secured, a grind of steeds, arms, jingling stirrups, voices loud that cursed fierce in the northern court. To her athirst for him her lover, war and power it spoke, him victor and so king, and then awoke a yearning to behold, to quit the dead. So a wild spectre down wide stairs she fled, burst on a glare of lynx and glittering mail, that shrunk her eyes and made her senses quail. To her a bulk of iron, bearded fierce, down from a steaming steed into her ears, this from the king, a boon, laughed harsh and hoarse. Two henchmen beckoned, who pitched sheer with force, loud clanging at her feet, hacked, hewn and red, crusted with blood. A knight in armor, dead, even Accolon, tossed with the mocking scoff, this from the king. Phantoms in fog rode off. And what remains? From Camelot to Gore that right she weeping fled, then to the shore, as that romancer tells, Ivilion, where she hath majesty gold crowned yet wan. In darkest cypress a frail piteous face queenly and lovely, round sad eyes the trace of immemorial tears as for some crime. They future fixed, expectant of the time when the forgiving Arthur cometh and shall have to rule all that lost golden land that drifts vague amber in forgotten seas of surgeless turquoise dim with mysteries. And so was seen Morgana nevermore, save once when from the Cornwall coast she bore the wounded Arthur from that last fought fight of Camlin in a black barge into night. But oft some see her with a palfreyed band of surge-stoled maidens throw the drowsy land of autumn glimmer, when are sharply strewn the red leaves, while broad in the east a moon swings full of frost, a lustrous globe of gleams, faint on the mooning hills as shapes in dreams.